So today we're going to be talking about Fullmetal Alchemist, specifically volumes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This will be a spoiler-filled discussion, so you have been warned. If you missed my first video talking about the first 6 volumes, I'll have it linked, but this is the second discussion talking about the second 6 volumes. I said this in a reading vlog already, but for those of you who don't watch my reading vlogs, this section contains my favorite part of the story. Not so far, just in general. The series really isn't allowed to cap that because I've already cried too much and that spot is too solidified in my mind as my favorite part of the series. It just needs to cool it a little bit. At least give me time to breathe. Anyway, we'll get to that. But in this section, we have a lot to cover, so let's cover it. We got a lot of information on the villains in these 6 volumes. I got quite a few answers, most of which only led me to a lot more questions. So there's that going for it. They talk more about, in the beginning of these volumes, they talk more about the fact that they're created beings, which we already knew about them. The villains, the baddies, the 7 deadly sins. We already knew that they were created beings, but here we learn that they're homunculi, which is like a person that's not a person. We find out, like, up to this point, our understanding, the readers, my understanding of a chimera has been this bastardized version of a created being where they're tortured, begging to die, miserable, not living a true life. And now we find out that there is such a thing as a successful chimera. It has been done, and that's what they are. These homunculi are successful chimera, which is kind of wild because they're so humanoid. They're so, that was quite the reveal for me. That's intense. They talk about how they all have reasons why they can't live in the normal world. I assume that's more than just the fact that they are combined with animals and every now and then pee in public. Is that what the dog one was saying? They were all created in a lab and they hate the lab that they were created in, which I think is really interesting. And of course, we also get the reveal that King Bradley is a homunculus himself, which was a really big reveal too. So he's a baddie. That's quite clear at this point. We've gotten plenty of hints that King Bradley is, at the very least, not definitively good. Like, we've gotten a lot of hints that he could potentially be a little bit, at the very least, morally gray, but I feel like I have confirmation now that he's a baddie. And in the midst of all these bombs being dropped about the baddies and everything that's going on with them and getting more information about the homunculi, we also have trademarks of the series happening. We have the humor, like Greed thinking Ed is dead and wondering if his villainous questioning went too far and he was being insensitive. We have Izumi showing up to tell Al off for getting kidnapped, and just generally she's being awesome. Some amazing action, which leads to Ed getting the upper hand because of his incredible intelligence and all the emotions. Okay, I have been watching the anime alongside reading the manga, but pronunciation, I'm still gonna fail here. So the scene of Martel, I'll say her name once and that'll be the only time. After she jumped inside of Al's suit of armor and was kind of holding him in place, kind of controlling him, whenever she is hearing her friends getting murdered and is freaking out and breaking down, and Al's forcing her to stay inside the suit of armor to protect her, but in the end she was still killed. This scene is incredible for a lot of reasons. It's great. This series does an amazing job of delivering on hugely emotional moments while also dropping really important information about the characters and the world itself at the same time. Like, for instance, with this scene, I'll talk about the emotions in a second, but a lot of things were revealed in this as well. One, the fact that she was losing it, hearing her friends die, hearing the people that she cares about die. This is really important for showing the humanity of these characters. And we have a couple scenes like this, and I'll talk about another one at the end of the video, but we've had several scenes like this where the baddies are really humanized, actually, I'll talk about a couple of these throughout the duration of this video, are really humanized, and we see how much they really care. They're not just these mindless killing machines. They're doing bad things, but they're not just these mindless, evil people who will do anything to accomplish their goals, we're seeing how much they care about each other, how much they are a family and value one another on a very deep level. We also get the scene of when she's killed and her blood splatters on the rune that ties Al's soul to the body of armor, and then he suddenly gets that flash of memories, which leads him to remember a little bit of when he came in contact with the truth whenever his body was ripped from his soul. And I don't understand that. You can help me with this, but only if you've recently read the manga or if you flip back through the manga and you're sure you're not going to spoil me. Because this series, the way it's written, it reads as one continuous story, and me breaking it up into sections, I know people easily get confused about when certain things are revealed. And I've seen that in my comments. I've not been spoiled, just people saying, I didn't realize that happened so early, or I thought you should have known this by now. So don't spoil me. Feel free to let me know if you feel safe in doing so, if I've just missed something. I don't know. I've either missed something or something's going to be revealed later on. I don't understand why her blood splattering against the rune should have activated those memories for him. Is it because at one point Lust does say that the homunculi are closer to the truth than humans are? Is it because you have to step through the void and sacrifice a piece of yourself, like maybe a piece of your soul, in order to make a chimera, and that's why they're closer to the truth? And since she was a chimera, her blood splattering against it just activated memories of the truth? Is that why? I don't know. Anyway, I don't understand why her blood splattered against his rune and that's what activated his memories, but it did, and that does hold a lot of implications. But anyway, the emotions of the scene. The emotions of her losing it in the suit of armor, trying to get out, trying to help her friends, and Al trying to protect her, even though she was physically holding him back. Like, she entered into his suit of armor without his consent and was controlling his limbs, and like, she's a baddie. And he still tried to protect her. Al is the sweetest soul. So is Ed, so is Winry. We've got a lot of sweetest souls here. But anyway, we cut to Al, who wakes up with blood everywhere and his bodice ripped open, and they show Martel's legs. Her body is covered up, blood everywhere, and then they tell Al, we opened you up and pulled her out. So while he was unconscious, whenever he got those memories pushed back to him, and then I guess he passed out, while he was unconscious, they removed her body from him, from his suit of armor, and then we just see it all. And then Al just breaks down because he wasn't able to save her. He wasn't able to protect her. I mean, that scene's intense. And it shows so much about the baddies. This whole scene shows so much about the baddies and their humanity, but it also exposes a lot of Al's humanity, which again, we see all throughout the series. But just seeing him trying so hard to do everything he can to do the right thing. And each time the boys are faced with some sort of horrifying situation, like Nina, and Ed broke down because they're just humans and they couldn't save her. They couldn't do anything. And now this, where Al, despite his greatest efforts, he couldn't help her. And now he breaks down. And it just shows so much of how much they care and how invested they are in people and in helping people. And you can see it all over Ed's face whenever Al is breaking down. But he covers it up, even though you can see that Ed, even though you can see that it's killing Ed, he covers it up, covers up the face that he initially takes, and he has a smile and a cheery tone, and because he realizes that despite what Ed is going through in that moment too, being there for Al is the most important thing at that moment. And again, that just their brotherly love for each other, the amount that they sacrifice for one another and put each other first constantly, and Winry as well is constantly putting them first. It's just the relationships in this series, the devotion to one another, the love for one another is like impeccably done. So we also, moving on from that trauma, we also get the scene where we're introduced to the father of homunculi. And is it just me, or is this Ed and Al's dad? Right? Right? They look exactly the same. Like, I know it's all mysterious and he's shrouded in shadows and stuff, but this is him, yeah? So in the volume before this, Lust said that the scientists became ingredients in their own research. And here, the man is hooked up to a machine. It seems like it's pulling from him. And the father says that he surrendered a portion of his soul in order to make the homunculi. This equivalent exchange was him surrendering a piece of his soul to create them, to create life, to create a successful chimera. So the father kills Greed, and he drinks him, I guess, to regain a piece of soul to regain the piece of the soul that it took to make him. Which leaves me to wonder, when Lust dies later on in this section of the story, since he wasn't able to put her in a vat of boiling water and then that squeezes some sort of juice out of her that he drinks and then gets his soul back, does that mean that the piece of his soul that he surrendered to make Lust, does he get that back? Or do you have to do whatever that ritual was in order to get is that piece of his soul just gone? Is that how we kill the father, by killing all of his Horcruxes? These are the questions I need to know. Do we even want to kill the father? Because if it's Ed and Al's dad, I have very mixed feelings. We also meet the adorable yet powerful Chang and her little panda guy, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce, as well as Ling, who has quickly become another one of my favorite characters in the series. I have many, but we'll talk more about him as the story progresses, but we met him. I do want to super briefly talk about the boys' reaction whenever they find out that Hughes died. There's so much that happens in these. I'm trying to focus on the main events, but this is kind of a main event for me. They didn't want to tell the boys because they didn't want to distract them. And I just think that the way they handled it was so mature. He goes directly to Hughes' wife, which I don't think is ever named. I don't think we ever actually get a name for Mrs. Hughes. So I'm going to call her Mrs. Hughes, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I'd like to name her as I speak of her because she's amazing. But anyway, he goes directly to Mrs. Hughes and just lays it all out in front of her. He tells her what happened, how he participated or was a factor in the events leading to Hughes's death, and apologizes. And I think it's fascinating that they didn't want to distract the boys with this knowledge, probably trying to protect them, probably afraid that they would not handle it maturely, but they handled it with the utmost maturity, going directly to her, telling her what they felt she deserved to know, and apologizing to her. Like, the way they handle these things that are so heavy and intense and life-changing, the way they handle all of the suffering and pain that's put on their shoulders, I feel like around every corner they just handle it with the utmost maturity and selflessness, owning up to things even to the point of a fault. I mean, they take too much responsibility and too much on their shoulders sometimes. But this scene was just really powerful to me to display their goodness, their pursuit of being the right kind of people. And then her response, her reply of like, that sounds like my husband doing everything he can for everyone else, and, you know, being there for them, responding so kindly. But then whenever they leave and they see her through the window, and like, you see how much it really, really hurts her, and it just, every character in this series is my favorite character. They do mention later on, whenever Ed tells someone, I can't remember who, that he did tell Mrs. Hughes what happened, and then they were like, "You idiot! That makes her vulnerable. You shouldn't have involved her in this, because now she could be a target." Which, I mean, that's fair. So maybe he didn't do the right thing entirely, but he really, really tried. So regardless of where I stand on should you have given her that information and potentially made her vulnerable, should you not have, regardless, I'm focusing on how amazing his heart is. Checking back in with the baddies, Envy is impersonating the military people, the officer people, to get information. Lust is dating them to get information. And also Barry's body is loose, which makes Barry very, very happy. I love Barry, and I love how excited he is to chop his own body up. I love how much humor he brings into absolutely every scene that he's in. And I also love that this whole plotline with Barry and his body is not just amazing comedic relief, but it's also used as a tool to reveal to us how much more is behind Al and his being separated from his body. The fact that at any point his soul, since it's tied to the wrong thing, could stop being tied to it. And it could be in 100 years, it could be tomorrow. Eventually his soul cannot stay tied to this suit of armor. As well as the reveal that, you know, his soul could reject his body, and if they don't find his body, if they don't put his soul back, then like he could cease to exist. Like all these things that are exposed, that are illustrated through Barry, may he rest in peace. All these things that are exposed through this amazing character that I love so much, directly tie to these reveals about Al, and I just think it's good storytelling. But also during all this, we get the amazing fight between Lust and Mustang and Havoc. And I said in a previous video, in my last video, I said that I know that Mustang and Hawkeye are fan favorites, and I didn't know them well enough to have opinions on them. Don't worry, they're some of my favorite characters now too. This scene was incredible. I love, the more I get to know Mustang and Hawkeye especially, the more I love them. The way Mustang was so loyal to Havoc and fought to protect him so much to the point of near death. And then whenever Lust went to Al and Hawkeye and said that she killed Mustang, and Hawkeye just lost it. Hawkeye's breakdown when she just unloaded on Lust, screaming and crying. That scene was so powerful. It was amazing in the manga, and it's one of the few scenes that then when I watched it in the anime, it was only amplified by how intense it was when it was brought to full life and I could hear her screaming. And it really illustrates how strong the loyalty is for Mustang to his people, how much he gives to protect them, but also how much they value him, how much they love him too. Hawkeye is an incredible character. Like in every scene she's in, she is so cool. But also the loyalty and the love that these characters have for each other, it speaks to me. So Al pulls Hawkeye away and Lust is after them, but then Mustang steps in to take her down. That scene was horrifying in the best way. And then we see how injured Mustang is, and they say that they're gonna call a doctor, and he says, good idea, call a doctor for Havoc. And again, it's just, he's constantly thinking about his people. What matters the most to him is making sure that they're protected, that they're safe, that they're cared for. Not to mention all the scenes with Havoc in the hospital. I mean, like, this is phenomenal stuff. So anyway, then we cut to Ed and Al's dad returning to his hometown, and I don't know if he's the father of the homunculi, but if he is, if he has fractured his soul to create these evil chimera, if he has done this, I don't appreciate him having such a charming introduction as their dad. Because I kind of want to like him. Even though he clearly doesn't know how to connect with his son, I kind of want to like him as a character. But if he's Voldemort, then I don't think I probably should. He clearly has no ability to connect with his son. But at the same time, he does plant the idea of their mom's hair when he knows Ed is listening. So even though he sucks at speaking to his son directly, he is trying to help him, and he does genuinely care. Also, there's this focus on pictures in these scenes, like when we see the picture of him with Pinko, I don't know how to say her name, when they're young, and we clearly see his face with her, but in the picture that he takes of him and with his family, his face is covered deliberately. Why? Why don't you want me to see? What reveal are you holding back? So with that, he then drops an ominous warning and then leaves so he doesn't spoil the plot. But then later, we see that he can withstand damage that seems like only the homunculi are capable of doing, and he calls himself a monster. So does fracturing his soul to make the homunculi make him near immortal like they are? Do we have to kill all the Horcruxes to kill him? Do we want to kill him? I can't tell. I mean, the panels where he says, I'm a monster, it's almost like it's trying to make me believe that he himself is a homunculi too. He's one of the seven deadly sins, but I don't think he's a created being. I think he's the father. So what's going on? So anyway, thanks to dear old dad, Ed and Pinko, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say her name, set out to do some grave digging. So they dig up the grave of their lost mother and find that it isn't her. So Ed breaks down laughing and reaches the conclusion that a dead person can never come back to life, no matter what. Then he calls his teacher, and in true Ed fashion, he tells her, I have a question for you, but if you don't want to answer it, don't. Hang up on me. It's okay. Ed is such a genuinely good person that even in this quest for knowledge, that's like, it's a good quest. He wants to make sure his brother isn't gonna die. He wants to tie his brother's soul back to his body, and he wants to restore his own body too, but it's really about Al. But anyway, this quest is worth having. But he's even with him being so focused on this quest, he still is constantly considering the emotions of others. So he calls his teacher and he's like, I have a question for you, but you don't have to hang up on me if that's what you need. But he tells her that the life he transmuted wasn't his mother, and he asks her if she's sure that the life she transmuted was really her child, and she hangs up. So I'll come back to that in a second. So Ed does confirm that Al's memories are legit. Again, he's already done that, but he did it again to be super, super sure. And then from there kind of assumes, okay, well, he comes to the conclusion that we cannot bring the dead back to life. Their mom was in the realm of the dead, and they could not pull her from there. Which means that when he pulled Al's soul back, he separated it from Al's body. Which means that Al's body is still somewhere, and he thinks it's in this void. It's in where the truth is. They decide that Al's body and Ed's body are tied to each other, which is why Ed eats so much and sleeps so much and all that jazz. But what I want to focus on, all these reveals are awesome and I really enjoy them. What I want to focus on again is the emotions, because again, Ed does not shy away from the responsibility that he needs to take for his actions. He doesn't try to hide or minimize his mistakes. He owns up to them. He looks people right in the eye, he tells them the truth, and he asks for forgiveness. And then Izumi calls. And this is where I cried like a baby, when she thanks him for that call where she hung up. Because all this time, I'm gonna read it. I feel like a great weight has been lifted from my soul. I didn't cause my child to die a second time. I mean, she, again, just like Ed, she takes responsibility for the fact that she did cause someone to suffer and that it was a terrible thing that she did. But at the same time, the knowledge that the thing that she's been carrying her whole life, which is the thing that she's been carrying for years, which is the idea that I brought my child back only to cause them to suffer all over again. Like, I cannot imagine the burden of that, and to be released by that, by Ed telling her what he learned, or being released of that by Ed telling her what he learned. Wow. This is for kids? This is for teenagers? Are you kidding me? Anyway, I want to do a quick shout out to the art, because we had this setup of more of Al's struggles, which is the fact that he can't eat, he can't sleep, and that sounds like less than fun. But we actually dig into that a little bit and talk about how terrible the nights are, how scared and lonely he feels. And in this scene where he says, I don't want to spend my nights alone anymore, I really appreciate the way she played with light in this scene so that it looked like he was crying, because it really is a curse on him that he's lost the ability to cry. You know, he feels so much, but the ability to express that feeling in any sort of physical way has been taken from him. And this scene where we see a visual representation of what's going on internally, I thought was really, really well done. So the boys devise a plan to draw the homunculi out by engaging with Scar, because the homunculi want Ed to be their human sacrifice. Ling overhears the plan and agrees to come with them. I love the humor around Ling. I love every scene. The humor surrounding his character, his carefree, inserting himself all the time. That humor it lands every time. I love it. So the boys create a ruckus, a fight begins, and this whole section is my favorite scene in the series. It's not allowed to get better. There's nothing that's allowed to top it. This is solidified as my favorite scene. Can't change. So we got this amazing fight with Ling and company. And in this fight, we get some amazing action, but we also see how much honor Ling has and the way he views what makes a true king and how much he values his people. But we also see it in Lanfin when she cuts off her own arm so as not to be a burden to Ling. Ling tells her over and over again that she's not a burden and he'll never leave her and she's too valuable to him as a person. But we also see that she'll do anything to serve him as well. And I love this scene because it's an awesome scene. It's a really cool scene, but also it really shows how much he's willing to give to his people, how much he values them and how much he serves them. But it also is a really good display of how powerful people can be if they're both devoted to each other. The level of devotion that Ling has for Lanfin, but also Lanfin has for Ling, makes them a duo that's so, so powerful. And he shows what leadership looks like when they're devoted to each other, the leader and the people. And it's a great contrast with King Bradley, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But first, let's also talk about the other fight that's going on at the same time, which is Scar, Ed, and Al. The scene is also incredible for the action, but I also love it because even though Scar is more powerful than the boys, he probably would overpower them and outlast them, more stamina. But he's also fighting their ideals by challenging them and making really good, solid points. But I think what makes this scene stand out to me even more is that even though it's cool battle, cool action, amazing character moments, but it's also the parallels that happen. You have Ling, a person of royalty who is looking to gain power, looking to rise in the ranks, fighting King Bradley, someone who is a figurehead, who is a leader of people. And you have them fighting physically, but you also have their conflicting ideals of what makes a true king and of what the role and responsibility of a king is to their people and as a leader happening simultaneously. And at the same time, you also have Scar and Ed and Al, alchemists who are fighting physically, one trying to overpower the other, but it's also a struggle of ideals and of mentality and of the cycle of trauma that's all playing out before us as well. Even though those fights are incredible, the shining star, the shining moment of this whole thing goes to Winry. We have the scene where Ed is confronting Scar about what he did to Winry's parents. They saved his life and yet he still killed them in cold blood. And he's confronting Scar about it, and Al's trying to tell Ed, stop, Winry's here. But she overhears it, and watching her break and scream at him to give her parents back, then picking up the gun, but Ed dives in front of her to protect her from Scar and protect her from being the one that kills him, which triggers the memory of Scar in the same situation when his little brother dove in front of him to protect him from the alchemist that killed his little brother, showing how far back this cycle goes and how close we were to continuing it. And the thing that makes this so great, I keep saying that, everything makes this so great, doesn't it? This scene is just layers and layers of incredible. Scar's character makes sense. His arc makes perfect sense, knowing just a piece of his backstory, knowing that his brother was killed unjustly by a bad alchemist, and his hatred, his pursuit of his version of justice, his idea that alchemists are bad, that makes sense. Of course he thinks that. Of course it's not the only option, but how he got here makes perfect sense. And then Winry picking up the gun, getting ready to kill this man, and without Ed's intervention, would she have done it? Wouldn't she have done it? We won't know. It doesn't matter. Her choice to pick up that gun, aim it at Scar, and get ready to shoot, this makes sense. Her parents were stolen from her. That piece of her childhood was stolen from her. Her parents left her as a child to go do something noble and good and were killed for it. Her wanting her version of justice for that also makes sense. Then when Ed finally got the gun out of her hands and reminded her of when she helped deliver that child and told her that her hands weren't meant for taking lives, they were meant for saving them. And then she breaks down in his arms and he holds her for a minute, but ultimately he has to let her go because he needs to help Al. I mean, what a scene. What a scene. These characters are so good. Their internal struggles, their external struggles, the way these these scenes of conflict play out, balancing the physical battle that's happening as well as the internal battle that's going on, and the intellectual and the battle of ideals, like all these things happening at once is amazing. But when it's time to pull back from all of that and just focus on the emotions of a girl that's lost her family, like it hits, man. It really, really hits. So Ling is freaking awesome, and he takes down Gluttony. Unfortunately, Gluttony is a little bit mad, and he got free, and now he's after killing Roy. But I'm also pretty sure I saw Gluttony's true form, or at least a piece of it, and it was yucky. But then we also have Havoc and Winry's arcs running parallel, working through the physical trauma and the mental trauma that they've faced, inspired by the people around them that support them and believe in them. We have Ed's promise to Winry that they'll get their bodies back, and he's gonna make sure that she cries tears of joy this time. I mean, it's obvious that Ed and Winry are on a track for a romance, but I just really appreciate that the build up to that isn't chemistry. It's not little flirting or little connections. Like it's not just a romantic chemistry that's building up. It's something so much deeper. It's this love and devotion to each other that is so encompassing. It's the fact that they know each other probably deeper than they know themselves. It's all these little moments of Winry seeing through Ed and Al and seeing what they're truly going through and making them connect when they're starting to separate, or when Ed's gone and she grabs him and she's like, "You idiot, go see your brother now," because she knows that Al's really working through some emotional stuff. It's seeing how much each of them puts on one another and being there to help carry the burden. It's just something so much deeper with all of these characters. They're already family. They're already so fully devoted to each other. Not just Ed and Winry, but Al as well. His love for them is so strong. Their devotion to one another. I don't know, just the buildup of this romance between Ed and Winry. I'll look stupid if that's not actually what happens. This buildup to the romance between Ed and Winry is just so much deeper than just there's chemistry between them and will they, won't they. Anyway, the adorable yet powerful girl who I don't know very well. If you can't remember the order of things, I don't know her very well. I've had very few scenes with her, so she's connected to Scar. I don't know how that's gonna go. What are we doing here? Is she going to be a part of Scar's redemption arc? Is Scar going to be a part of her corruption arc? I have no idea what we're doing with these characters. But we also get the reveal that the homunculi are creating a giant philosopher's stone, and they're gonna kill a lot of people to make it. And we can definitely say that the next volume is going to start off with a lot of action. So the next little chunk here is gonna be intense. I still have a lot of questions, a lot of questions, other than the ones that I've already mentioned in this video. Also, Gluttony is chained up and kept, not Gluttony, Sloth is chained up and kept working for some reason. What? When's that gonna come into the story? We have the message that the boy's mom left for their dad, which was, I'm sorry, I'm gonna die before you, so I wasn't able to do what I promised. Sorry about that. What do you mean? What do you mean? So she, obviously the reason dad left, she was aware of what the reason was and was okay with it to some degree. What? There's so many things in this series hinted at that I just don't know what to do with yet. But anyway, that's those volumes. I've read 12 volumes, I have 12 more to read, so we've got some more discussions a-coming. As I was reviewing the material and prepping and planning for this video, and as I'm filming it and we'll be editing it, I am reading Vinland Saga Arc 3. And then once I complete that, I will be reading the next 6 volumes and we'll be talking about Fullmetal again, so all that's coming, but also I talk about all this stuff chapter by chapter on my Patreon as I read it in text, like on the Discord. Consider checking that out if you're interested in like daily discussions about these series. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel, and Tuesdays and Thursdays on the second channel, which is always linked in the description of this video. I'll see you again soon. Bye.